Hi, I'm Ken Harbaugh, former U.S. Navy pilot and host of Warriors in Their Own Words. Our mission here is simple: to preserve stories of service and sacrifice from America's warriors. Through archival interviews with veterans from World War II up through modern day conflicts, we present firsthand accounts of what it takes to defend a nation. This is the unvarnished, unsanitized truth from those who lived it. This is Warriors in Their Own Words.
In the airplane, when you were going into the target, you felt no fear because you didn't have time for that sort of thing. You had to get yourself up like a football game, get yourself all mentally prepared and up for it, and therefore, when you're in combat situation, and people may get killed or whatever, you don't stop and ponder on that situation. You can't. You don't have the luxury. Problem being, this missile can pull 10 Gs and come at you at Mach 3.5, and there's nothing in the world could evade that. But we did.
On a recent episode of Warriors in Their Own Words, we told the dramatic story of a Wild Weasels pilot. Today, we'll meet the other vital member of the Weasels team, the Electronic Warfare Officer, or EWO, who manned the backseat of their aircraft. Captain Tom Bear Wilson was responsible for monitoring radar in order to warn his pilot, Colonel Jerry Hoblet, of threats like surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, anti-aircraft artillery, and enemy aircraft. He also protected their aircraft by jamming enemy radar. The Wild Weasels were tasked with one of the Air Force's most daring missions in Vietnam. They flew fighter jets like the F-100, F-105, and F-4 deep into hostile airspace to coax the enemy into opening fire with their surface-to-air missiles so the Weasels could spot the launch sites.
In every war since World War I, the primary losses have been on the head of the dive-bombing fighter pilot. Our job was to protect him. When Jerry and I got to Tak Ly, Thailand, their loss rate was 63% that they would not complete their 100 missions. And it's a pretty spectacular and good mission to try to stop that. And we did that two different ways. The first was on a temporary basis, an immediate basis for that mission. In other words, we would fire our Shrike anti-radiation missiles, try to keep them off the air, and have immediate results. The second and more lasting mission was for tomorrow's air crews. And for that one, you actually had to dive bomb and destroy the surface-to-air missile site. In doing that, we shared the same probable losses that the strike crews did. But I think the specialness was that our job was there to protect probably the bravest men in the world.
Single-seat fighter pilots were always wary of having a backseater. Tom Wilson and Jerry Hoblet well remember the first time they met.
At Nellis, when they got together and we had our several missions of training in the Weasel aircraft, and that's about how it would. We both wandered around the evenings, get together, and I had pretty well spied out and said, I'm not so sure about these guys, bearing in mind that single-seat fighter pilots don't care at all about having somebody else in their airplane. And I was not at all sure about that how I was going to go with that. So pretty well I looked around and said, that man looks like he might be acceptable. And so it was kind of a winnowing out. And I guess Tom was doing about the same thing. He had heard uncomplimentary but inaccurate things about our arrogance and things like this, and thought that I was probably the most modest of the group, I suppose.
Jerry and I got along well before we started flying. He was a pompous ass and I was a nice guy. He did his job. I did my job. He didn't know that much about my job. I didn't know that much about his job. It's called Hunter-Killer, where we used an electronically equipped airplane with an electronic warfare officer such as myself in the backseat. And we went in to locate the surface-to-air missile site. And then on our wing, we had dive bombing airplanes, F-105s again, and they would do the actual destruction. Actually, at a point not far down the road, we carried destructive capability too. We carried CBUs, cluster bomblet units, and the wingman carried his hard bombs. And between us, we did a number on the site when we'd catch it. But finding them was just very difficult. To find the site, you had to see it. The North Vietnamese were masters of camouflage, and the world was green over there. They hid their sights very well, and they also had dummies set up openly so you could attack the wrong site. So we had to know where it was, and to find it, the only way you could find it was to have him launch missiles. You could very successfully get him to launch his missiles at you if you flew up high, throttled back a little, and presented a great target, which is what we did. Once he launched missiles at us, we may have another site launch it. But all this while, Jerry had to keep his eyes on the site. And all the while he was dodging the missile and everything, he had to keep his eyes on the smoke from the site, keep it in view, and then we would do our dive bomb maneuver. It was extremely difficult to do all the execution phases and then to successfully hit the site. But we did that.
Well, the air battle always has been very intense, very complex, and very difficult to sort out. This didn't change in the Wild Weasel business, but it was amplified quite a bit. The fighter pilot's basic problem is that he has too much coming at him. Too much information is coming into his cockpit. What he needs, what his lifeblood is processed information. He has to have the wheat separated from the chaff, and he has to have it done real time, split second time. That's what Bear Wilson did for me. He kept track of what the enemy was doing from an electronic standpoint, from the missile standpoint, from the surface-to-air missile standpoint. I was keeping track of what the other things were doing, the MiGs, the strike force behind me, and the management of my flight. But he kept me advised of the primary threat, the threat that not only was a threat to us, but the threat that we intended to deal with and make them a negative threat, less of a threat. It took a very special person to be able to look at all the things that he looked at and communicate that to the guy in the front without further loading the guy in the front with information. He had to sort it out, understand what the enemy was doing, anticipate what the enemy was going to do, and communicate that to me in a very minimal fashion. Sometimes he would do that with only inflection of a voice. Even a grunt while we're pulling G's could tell me lots of things. Very few people could do what Bear Wilson did. Only 2 or 3 did it well. And Bear Wilson was unquestionably the best of any of them.
In the back seat, we had all the standard equipment, but we also had a panoramic scope. Now this panoramic scope, I could see the entire spectrum on a frequency scale. In other words, every signal that's out there. And I had another function. I could actually stop and time my signal with the surface-to-air missile operator's signal. I could see where he was looking in the airspace. I could see if he's looking over here, whatever. And I could also, by looking at the level, see his interest in us. But I could say, isolate just that one and say, this guy's serious. He's about to shoot at us. And so our equipment was very special, and we didn't have that many of these airplanes, these especially equipped airplanes. So when we lost them, it was a great panic. We couldn't perform the Wild Weasel mission, which was, as I said, those 2 immediate mission and the strategic mission. And so we had to replace them. And that's what Jerry and I did in October of 1966. We were one of the 7 crews that ferried new airplanes over because they'd run out completely. We had incredibly sophisticated enemy, much more sophisticated than we thought, in North Vietnam. We went to a place called Yen Bay, which was a crossing point for the Red River. And we didn't know that you should avoid Yen Bay. But as we approached, we had these 3 other airplanes out here, relying on us and all our astuteness. And there was an undercast, a very heavy undercast. And they launched missiles. You know, I picked it all up and everything, fine, they launched. And the other thing is, we'd been told that these looked like great big telephone poles. Well, this missile is going Mach 3.5, if you can imagine it, 3.5 times the speed of sound. We're going about 3/4 the speed of sound, or around the speed of sound. So closure is well over Mach 4. That gives you an idea how fast this thing, it's a blur. It's just a blur. And we can't see the ground. Jerry couldn't see it to dodge it. So the first thing we're looking and we're yammering. The rest of the force very astutely turned around and said, heck with you guys, and went back across the red and waited for us, knowing what would happen. I assumed they'd been there a while. The SAM came darting out of the clouds, blew up just beneath us. And by the way, all the sound effects you hear on television and movies, this boom, there's no boom. High explosives go crack, just like that. And it's a great, huge orange explosion with black shooting out the top and the bottom, and that's all shrapnel and deadly stuff. And it just knocked our airplane upside down. We're sort of feeling ourselves and everything and saying, are we still alive? Are we still here? We were alive. And I said, I'm okay finally, or something like that, probably in a very high-pitched voice. And Jerry said, I'm okay. We went back across the river, picked up all those guys, and went on to the target. We turned and regrouped back over the other side, the friendly side of the Red River, went back in toward the target again. The strike force commander, who was leading the 24-ship dive bombing flight, sort of ignored protocol and said, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead, and damn the SAMs full speed ahead. Went into a pop. He'd been pre-briefed. He went directly in on his target, and a SAM caught him right in the cockpit. The airplane continued to fly out of it, but of course the pilot was dead. And we learned a great lesson there. We learned that success takes a lot of work. Jerry and I went back to Tockley. He doesn't like to talk about it, and I don't like to talk about it. But we considered that first mission an utter failure. We had done everything wrong.
Well, on our first combat mission, together, at that period of time, I had already had 25 combat missions as a strike pilot on my own. And I thought I kind of knew what was going on. However, I made a couple of poor tactical decisions and got us in a lot of trouble. Got us to where we not only nearly lost our own lives, but lost the lives of other people. This caused us to go back, and we had already studied a lot. We had trained as much as we had time to, but it was obvious that we hadn't done anywhere near enough work, either together or individually. It was also obvious that at this point, our tactics that we were told by the people who preceded us were so undeveloped as to leave us in a lot of trouble. So Tom and I recognized that what we needed to do is to really approach this very carefully, and you didn't have much time to be careful. You're going to fly the next day. But we had to really get into the study mode and really figure out what was going to do, and we had to come up with new ideas and do it quickly and do it very efficiently, because not only was our own lives at risk, but more importantly, we had the very high risk of failing, which is worse to a professional than dying.
We started studying day and night. That's all we did was study. Jerry, who was a weapons school instructor, Top Gun school instructor, started coming up with tactics, and he studied the weapons we carried just incessantly. He memorized all these tables and everything. I memorized our equipment and the enemy SAM. I can today tell you about the length and the burn time and everything of every one of those weapon systems. And it never happened again. From that point on, we knew where to go, and we got better and better, to the point that we used to say we would drop leaflets on Moscow if they wanted us to. The airplane was magical, told us everything that was happening in the air, and we were capable after a while. But you've got to remember, our job was protecting the bravest and most honorable men that we had ever known. And that made the mission a lot easier. But the F-4 and the F-105 fighter pilots were tremendously brave. We felt pretty invulnerable. The equipment, as long as the equipment operated well, we felt we could face anything. Because the equipment made it like you could walk into a room and there is a wild animal in there. And if the lights are off and he can see and you can't see, you've got a problem. But suddenly this equipment turns on the light. You can see the predators in there. And once you can see them, you can deal with them. And that's the way we fought. And we were pretty tough. I never felt, after 30 missions, I never felt very vulnerable. That's the truth. They had the SA-2 guideline missile and the Fan-Song track-while scan radar. Very capable. It was the most capable system, by the way, even today. It's Mach 3.5 missile, which is fast. It's 35 feet long. It's extremely accurate. It's fired with the booster pushing it out to 5 miles. The booster drops off at 5 miles, exposing the antennas in the back. And then you have data link that you use. Okay, there's the airplane. Use your data link to maneuver your missile. He likes his best tracking mode it's called a half rectified lead. He looks at the airplane. Of course, that would be a pursuit curve. He looks where the airplane is going to be. That's his computer saying, okay, he's going to be out here. Half rectified says, okay, let's fire that missile somewhere right in the middle, and that's got to shoot down that airplane. Now, this guy is going at 3.5 Mach. You're going at almost 1 Mach. That's a lot of Mach. That's over Mach 4, that your closer rate. It's just zipping along through the sky. It's got a great big, I think it's 700-pound warhead. And when it goes off at that speed, it's tremendous. It sprays this deadly steel shrapnel out. And great, huge orange core and black on either end, and then white beyond it. It's spectacular. Very accurate. Our job as an EWO was to tell the pilot how to dodge it, first of all. And we talked to North American engineers who were very intelligent on this stuff. And they said, okay, if you dodge it like it's an airplane, it'll do the same job. But not really. What you're dodging is the computer. This thing has to say, okay, this is where he is, this is where I project that he will be, and I'm going to guide in the middle. Okay, if I'm up here and close, and he breaks into this thing, it cannot project a point of impact. Therefore, that's computer noise. And that computer takes a second now for him to say, okay, his point of impact is moving like crazy. I can't tell exactly where it is. So he reverts then to a trail. In other words, he goes just right at the airplane. In a second he reverts like that, he's going to miss. So he'll go behind you or above you. And if you dodge it like it's an airplane, you can dodge the missile. Problem being, this missile can pull 10 Gs and come at you at Mach 3.5, and there's nothing in the world could evade that. But we did. In the airplane, when you were going into the target, you felt no fear because you didn't have time for that sort of thing. You had to get yourself up like a football game, get yourself all mentally prepared and up for it, and therefore, when you're in a combat situation, and people might get killed or whatever, you don't stop and ponder on that situation. You can't. You don't have the luxury. When you land, you still don't have the luxury. Now later on, I'm sure other people kind of fell apart like I did, like I said, much later. The crew chiefs of these airplanes, when they would see their pilot not coming back, and all the other pilots around them coming back, and theirs didn't come back, that was touching, very, very touching. We lost our close friends. They lost a little part of their life. Probably felt it more at the time. Later, when the POWs were released, and you started thinking about all those dead, fine people, each one was the top of his high school class. Each one. They were A students. They were Eagle Scouts, and we lost that. We lost that. Every kill that we had, every time we killed a SAM site, and we went on a few, Jerry made damn sure that he shared that responsibility. In other words, are you ready? And if I had said no, I don't know if I did, I may have. If I had said not this time or something, we wouldn't have gone in. But we did everything together. And if I said the signal is just a little bit left, he knew exactly what I meant. I didn't have to say 4 degrees or 10 degrees or whatever. It was a communication without words. We depended upon one another. And by the way, we formed a friendship that would last until I die. 2 missions that really got my attention over there, and I believe got Jerry's too. One day we were flying over in the Navy side, that's toward the water, near Haiphong. Our normal area was Hanoi. We were flying near Haiphong. Now the Navy did not have Wild Weasels. They used EA-6Bs, which is a different concept. They used jamming and launch strikes only. In other words, they just had the do it now protection. So we always expected when we went over there a lot of SAM activity, lots of guns, and that sort of thing. In our area, they were afraid we'd pounce on them and kill them. Over there, they didn't do that sort of thing. So we were going toward Haiphong, just south of Haiphong, and looking at a site there. And the site came up, fired at us. And they all fire in threes, so we had 3 missiles coming at us. We knew about those. By that time, we'd been there 40 or 50 missions, and we knew what we were doing. And then Jerry turned, and he was after that site. And another site fired at us. So, okay, that's 6 missiles in the air after us. That's okay. We're still concentrating on that first guy. And then I announced a third site fired at us. And so we had 9 missiles in the air this one point in time at our little rosy bodies. Our wingman and the rest of the flight just kind of pulled back, and here we were facing all these SAMs. And Jerry astutely dodged the first one. And normally if you dodge the first SAM, the other 2 will go by you on that covey. And then reversed or whatever he did. But anyway, all 9 SAMs were going by the wayside when he was in the pop delivering weapons. There's a camera that comes on when you release your weapons, and it's a 70 millimeter camera, and it goes from fore to aft, and it picked up 3 more missiles coming in from the rear. So we had 12 missiles in the air at that one moment in time after our butts. That's one. The second one was, there's a watershed town called Tai Nguyen in North Vietnam. It's the site of, it was the site and is the site of Ho Chi Minh's pride and joy, the steel mill. And in early March, we were told to go destroy the steel mill. The strike pilots were. Always before, we've been told, do not hit that steel mill. Stay away from the steel mill. And so we hit all around it, and they built up the defenses and built them up. There were some 16 SAM sites in the area. They had more than 1,000 guns estimated in the area. A friend of mine, Robin Oles, said he saw nothing in World War II to come close to the amount of flak and destruction there. However, we went in and bounced a SAM site, hit it, got a nice clean kill. And coming off, another site came on the air from up north of the target. And we didn't have any bombs anymore. We'd already shot our missiles, and the same with the wingmen. And I'll go over a little tactic we did, but there's only ourselves and our wingmen. But we saw the site up north, electronically, and Jerry started homing in on him. I guess to scare him, keep him off the air, whatever. He launched missiles. And this was the Russian training site. He was the infamous one. And Jerry had a great difficulty dodging the SAMs. We assumed they had a visual system. In other words, not just the radar, but they were also looking at us visually. And it was almost impossible to dodge that SAM. He finally did, and we were sort of in shock, at not being able. We'd dodged all kinds of missiles, couldn't dodge this one, finally did. And then poor Jerry went berserk. He started strafing, 60-degree strafe, 60-degree strafe, and he just shot the guy to bits. But another hairy mission. Several things that happened there, you remember vividly because it's such an impact upon your life, and you're young and you're brave and all. But the thing I remember most was the camaraderie. Jerry and I developed a very close friendship, and between two humans that he's closer than a brother. I have not much regard for the North Vietnamese so-called technician. I've got great regard for the North Vietnamese soldiers, by the way, and their top brass who moved these guys around. But the guys in the SAM sites, I could see, like I said, I could turn my scope into his scope, and I could see when we would get in hot and we would be about to deliver bombs, his signal would just sit static. He was running. Those folks were running. And when we dropped and we completely destroyed a site, that was the reason they were running. Before we had 30 missions, we didn't know what we were doing. It was a very dangerous mission. Some of the guys let off at about 80 missions, I assume, looking to go home. I don't remember us doing that. I do know our last 5 missions were very easy. 96, 7, 8, 9, were very easy. They gave them to us in the less threat areas. I don't think we asked for them. In fact, we enjoyed being the ones picked for the real hairy missions. We were young. You felt like you were protecting people. If you think you're going to get shot down, you're going to get shot down. I've known people that approached us in the bar and said, "Would you tell my wife this sort of thing?" My gosh, that's heavy. That guy knows he's going to get shot down, and he did every time. You could forecast it. When a guy started acting like he was going to be shot down, I'm like, oh boy, you have the deadly environment to do it. You can't do that. You can't back up. So I don't think we did. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think we backed off. I was in Maxwell Air Force Base in Command and Staff College. I was a major at the time. And watching on television, you would watch as each POW was released, if you remember, each night for several nights. And I had a drink for every one of them. And, when it's 75 drinks, it's kind of heavy, but it's just all of your emotions are just kind of dangling out there. And then all of these friends coming back after 7 years of being a POW. It wasn't a short time, it was 7 years. Then later I met a lot of them as they'd come in. I'd bring them to my house when I lived in Las Vegas. And I hate to say this, but a great number of them wanted to go down to the Palomino Club, which is a strip joint. And they hadn't really seen the female form in a few years, and they enjoyed that. Of course, I'll never give names on that. As I've written in my books, I sincerely feel we could have won the war in any 2 weeks. We could have forced the North Vietnamese out of the South, and it was proven, of course, during the 12 days of Christmas in 1972. When after 12 days, the North Vietnamese came to the table, gave us anything they wanted, released our POWs, whatever. And I've always felt that any 2 weeks, we could have won it. And if we had done the same thing in 1966 or 65, the first time I was over, There wouldn't have been a long 7-year war. There would have been a short police action. I think that's frustrating. But then you got to the point where they said you could not turn right over some targets because that would take you near Hanoi. And we didn't want a bomb hanging on an airplane that might fall off an airplane over Hanoi. Some of these silly restrictions were just so prohibitively dangerous for us, as if no one cared about our lives, but they wanted to make sure they didn't give any kind of a show that we were bad guys. Here's how silly it really was. On Christmas Day, 1966, these folks in Washington said, we will not fly on Christmas Day. We'll give them a day off. And so when it was Christmas in Washington, D.C., we did not bomb them. But when it was Christmas where we were, we bombed the hell out of them. I mean, that sort of inane restrictions killed people. I hated it. All the guys hated it. What can you do? Change it for the next war. Do I think it was right? Who knows? I can't answer that. I really can't. Yeah, I did. Inside my heart, I said, yeah, it's worth it to go up and protect these guys. And I would do it today. If they said, Wilson, you're old and crotchety, but you can go out and fly an airplane and protect probably the bravest people that have ever faced combat. Now, Army guys are very brave folks, too. I don't mean any slight there. But I've never seen people go out and face death like these fighter pilots did. And to protect them, yeah, I'd do it today. So yeah, it was worth it. I just came to that conclusion. When you look at it as our job was trying to protect these guys, we didn't always do it, but we were trying to do that. And when you lived with them and knew, and you saw the heroic things they did, and the way they died. I've had a friend that got killed over a stupid truck, an F-105. He was going down, got all shot up. So he hit the truck with his airplane. Now that is not a good trade, But he was probably shot up and wounded badly. Who knows? I don't know. I do know this. I had my little spot in the bar every night, and I looked down and I said, I'm becoming an alcoholic. I got to stop this stuff. So I stopped drinking. And the next night I went over and just ate dinner at the club and ignored that bar. The next night I went over and ignored it. Next night I went over and I saw the same guy, Ralph Carlock, walking out of the club saying, "Hi, Bear." I saluted him, went straight to the bar and had a drink because he's the guy who'd been dead 3 days.
That was Captain Tom Bear Wilson. Warriors in Their Own Words is our attempt to present an unvarnished, unsanitized truth of what we have asked of those who defend this nation. Thank you for watching, and by doing so, honoring those who've served. This program was produced by Evergreen Podcasts and Documentary.tv. I'm your host, Ken Harbaugh. If you've enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe below.